I suggest we'll get started. So welcome everyone. My name is Bram Meijertsen, and today it's going to be me, Britt Wang Jensen, and Lisa Heggie, representing the EASO's Early Career Network Board. Britt will be leading the Q&A session, and Lisa will take care of the chat and technical matters. So the Early Career Network aims to create opportunities for early career obesity professionals to meet, discuss, and learn from each other. So I'd ask you to please connect with us on social media and sign up to the EASO Connect website, where you will be able to find recordings of these webinars. Lisa will share all the pages with you in the chat, so you should be able to find those there. So in today's session, we'll hear talks from the winners of the EASO-Novo Nordisk Foundation New Investigator Awards in the disciplines of public health, childhood obesity, basic science, and clinical research. Many thanks to the speakers for joining us. We're very much looking forward to your talks. So the speakers will have about 10 minutes to present their research, and we really want to ask the audience to engage in the Q&A for 5 minutes, which will happen immediately after each talk. And feel free to raise your virtual hand or ask a question in the chat. And as always, we would like to encourage you to keep your cameras on so we can make this an interactive session. But before we start the presentations, I would like to hand over to Volkan Yumur, who is the EASO President-elect and Vice President of the EASO Southern Region. He will tell a bit more about the EASO-Novo Nordisk Foundation partnership and annual awards. So please, Volkan.
Thank you very much, Bram. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great pleasure that I join you for today's EASO Early Career Network webinar, focusing on the spotlight on EASO-Novo Nordisk Foundation 2023 New Investigator Awards. On behalf of the European Association for the Study of Obesity, I extend a warm welcome and give thanks for our partnership with the Novo Nordisk Foundation, which has made these awards possible. The European Association for the Study of Obesity is a European federation with 36 member states and was established in 1986. Its vision is identifying and solving the challenges of obesity through collaborative action with multidisciplinary stakeholders underpinned by a strong scientific understanding. The Novo Nordisk Foundation is an independent Danish enterprise foundation that dates back to 1924. The Novo Nordisk Foundation envisions improving people's health and fostering the sustainability of the society and the planet. Last year, the foundation awarded almost 700 grants amounting to 1 billion euros in total. The EASO and the Novo Nordisk Foundation have established a 3-year partnership and will offer these prestigious new investigator prizes again in 2024 and 2025 on basic science, clinical research, childhood obesity, and public health, each accompanied by a research grant. Winners of the year 2023 are invited to return to ECO, which is the European Congress on Obesity, next year in 2024, when we will be in Venice. And they will be presenting the results of their research at this Congress. Some news about the kitchen of this event, which is the selection committee. Well, the selection process has been enormously rigorous. During our assessment meeting on the 24th of March, in Manchester, UK, the committee engaged in thorough discussions, scrutinizing each application. The assessment committee undertook the task of selecting the very best from the best of all. Many thanks to them for their dedication and commitment. We hope that the session today will inspire many other early career professionals to consider their applications in 2024. With that, I will hand over to Bram to introduce our first speaker. Once again, I express my gratitude to all of you for being a part of today's event.
Thank you so much, Volkan. This is a good reminder of the high level of science we'll be hearing about today. So first, I would like to introduce the recipient of the new Investigator Award in Public Health, Dr. Susanna Mills. She's a clinical lecturer and public health specialty registrar at Newcastle University in the United Kingdom. She has conducted extensive research on the impact of severe mental illness on the risk of developing obesity and its associated comorbidities. Her work has also focused on weight management strategies for this vulnerable population. Susanna, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Bram. So I shall share my screen now. And if I could just have a thumbs up from someone to say that they're good to go. Lovely. Okay, thank you very much. So firstly, thank you so much for the invitation to be here today. It's a real pleasure. I'd like to say also a big thank you to the EASO-Novo Nordisk Foundation for funding these awards. And it's really a privilege for the four of us to be the first recipients of the awards. And I'm going to share with you today a little bit about my own experiences working in obesity in the public health setting, a bit about the research that I've undertaken to date, and then my future plans in terms of the use of the award. So a little bit about me first. So I'm a medical doctor by background. I trained at the University of Oxford and I lived in the northeast of England ever since. I've just recently completed my training to become a public health consultant. And alongside my wider public health work, I'm also a clinical lecturer at Newcastle University, which is funded by the National Institute for Health and Care Research, or NIHR. And this means that I'm enabled to spend 50% of my time on public health research and 50% on wider public health clinical work. And really throughout my research career, I've had a keen focus on public health nutrition, including weight management and addressing obesity and overweight. And then more latterly, I've begun to focus more on these challenges in the context of people who are in vulnerable groups, such as people living with mental health issues and particularly severe mental illness. So I appreciate you'll all be very well versed in what we mean by overweight and obesity, but perhaps a little bit less familiar with severe mental illness. So this term, severe mental illness, or SMI, encompasses conditions such as schizophrenia and related psychotic disorders, such as bipolar and severe personality disorder. Very sadly, we know that there's an unfair and avoidable mortality gap between people living with severe mental illness and the wider population, which is in the region of 15 to 20 years. This is largely due to physical health conditions rather than mental health conditions themselves. And in turn, these are very strongly influenced by public health risk factors, which include tobacco use, illicit drug use, diet and exercise. But really overall, it's very clear that obesity is a key driver. And so more support is needed for people living with overweight and obesity in this context. I think this graph here really brings home the data. This is evidence from the Health Foundation in 2018. And here we're comparing the prevalence of physical health conditions amongst people living with severe mental illness, which is shown in the green bars, against the wider population, shown in the grey bars. And here on the far left, you can see that particularly for obesity, people living with severe mental illness are twice as likely nearly to develop this condition. So it's a significant problem. So in the UK where I work, there has been an acknowledgement that there is a clear overlap between physical health conditions and mental health conditions, as shown in the cartoon on the left. And this has also started to be reflected in high-level policy documents, such as the NHS Long-Term Plan, the NHS 5-Year Forward View for Mental Health, and on a national government level, the Department for Health and Social Care's areas of research interests. However, although this has been reflected in policy, I have to say that really to date, there's been very little in terms of traction and actual change for people living with both severe mental illness and obesity. So coming on to my work specifically, I've worked a lot recently in secure forensic services. And just to make sure we all have a shared understanding of what this means, there's about 6,000 people currently detained in the UK in secure care hospitals in high, medium and low secure settings. And these are people who are living with severe mental illness, but they've also committed a crime or pose a threat to themselves or other people. And this means that they're not free to come and go at will, but they reside in locked wards. They may have opportunities for observed or accompanied leave, but overall their liberty has been taken away from them. And we know that in these contexts, the prevalence of physical health conditions are very high, and particularly the prevalence of overweight and obesity, which is estimated to be at least 80%, so almost everyone living in these settings. And it's also probably important to reflect at this point on the bi-directional relationship between mental and physical health issues. So not only are people living with severe mental illness more likely to develop physical health conditions such as overweight and obesity, but the converse is also true. And I think that's important for our understanding of how we might address these issues in practice. So in 2017, what used to be Public Health England and is now the UK Health Security Agency endeavoured to undertake a programme of work to understand more about some of the weight management challenges in secure mental health settings. And they teased out some of the key factors, which are multifactorial, as you can see on the cartoon here. But ultimately, in terms of evidence for what worked, the only strong evidence they could really find is that there's a need to better tackle obesity in secure settings. So we don't really know what works yet, but we do need to be tackling the problem better. So I've talked a lot about population level work so far and policy measures, but I'd like to bring this back home to the individual level as well, because after all, we are talking about individual people with their own lives, needs, and we need to understand how to address those better. So I'd like to introduce you to Ashley. And in his late 20s, Ashley started to hear voices. These escalated and sadly led him to attack his brother with a knife. Ashley was subsequently diagnosed with schizophrenia, detained under the Mental Health Act, and has been residing since in a mental health hospital, a secure setting. He's been there for the past 4 years, and although fortunately his psychotic symptoms are now much better controlled with antipsychotic medication, unfortunately his physical health has declined. He's developed obesity, and very recently that has tipped him into developing type 2 diabetes. Now, obviously, we've amended some of the personal details here to protect anonymity, but unfortunately, far from being an anomaly in these settings, this kind of situation is very much the norm. And that's really a key driver for the work that I've been undertaking recently in these settings. So to try to address some of the issues that I've described to you, I was funded by the Academy of Medical Sciences through a starter grant for clinical lecturers to undertake a programme of work using mixed methods and stakeholder engagement to try to develop a better evidence base to hopefully inform future co-production of weight management interventions for secure care settings. So this involved 4 integrated work streams. The first was a survey of all staff working in secure care settings at Mental Health Trust in the north of England to really try to understand more about some of the barriers and opportunities for addressing weight management in these settings. This was anonymised to help to get honest opinions from staff to really understand what some of the key issues might be. And the findings from the survey went on to inform an ethnographic approach, whereby I spent time over a 6-month period on a low secure male mental health ward to really see in practice what happens and what doesn't happen in these settings with reference to physical activity opportunities and diet. Because with the best will in the world, sometimes policy measures aren't necessarily implemented accurately, so it's good to see in practice what actually happened. And then the findings from the ethnography in turn went on to inform the development and undertaking of focus groups and interviews. So I undertook focus groups separately with current service users, former service users, carers and multidisciplinary staff in one NHS trust, again to tease out more about some of their views and experiences around weight management. And this was complemented by undertaking 11 semi-structured interviews in a second NHS trust to understand again what some of the key issues might be and what some of the things that were the same and were different in the second mental health trust setting. And the last phase has been a triangulation approach. So putting all this evidence together to see what's the same and what's different between the work streams and making sense of the evidence base as a whole. So in the interest of time, I won't talk through all these at length, but I just wanted to present to you briefly some of our key findings so far. So as you might well imagine, people living in secure care service are very much residing in an overall obesogenic environment, which makes it very difficult for them to achieve and maintain a healthy weight. Often this starts with a prescription of antipsychotic medications, which are very much necessary for maintaining someone's positive mental health, but often has negative physical implications, including weight gain. And often it does seem that a structured plan is not put in place in terms of mitigating the weight gain that is likely to occur. Alongside this, people in secure care services often have a very sedentary lifestyle. This is often a reflection of the mental health illness itself, the medication use, and often tied in as below with low motivational levels to eat well and to exercise, which sadly is often a reflection of the fact that people have frequently had few members of family or friends who invested in their own self-care. So therefore it's difficult for patients to see why they should put the time and effort in for that themselves. There was more or less universal acceptance that people didn't like the catered food that was provided on the hospital site. And therefore they often sought out alternatives, which were generally very unhealthy. So for example, if they had escorted or unescorted leave from the site, they might well go to the local shop to buy crisps, chocolate and fizzy drinks. Takeaways were often frequently purchased alongside or in place of catered meals. And also the food brought in by family and friends were typically quite unhealthy. Understaffing, as many of you will be aware, is a key issue in mental health trusts in the UK and internationally. And often this meant that unfortunately there wasn't the time to have health promoting conversations with patients. And also there often wasn't enough time to facilitate physical exercise opportunities, because if people need to be accompanied, for example, for going for the gym or for a walk, if the staff weren't available, then that opportunity was reduced. And another key issue that came up frequently was a tension between patient choice and health. So, for example, we heard from many patients and staff that the liberty's been taken away. They've got very few pleasures in life. If people have pleasure from food, then you're going to take that away from them as well. But then on the flip side, we also heard, particularly from staff, but also from patients, that it seemed really ethically wrong that we should be pushing patients into a healthcare setting and making their physical health worse. Because after all, as we've seen, it tends to be the physical health conditions that are actually killing people and not the mental health conditions themselves. So I've presented to you some evidence from my empirical work recently in secure care settings, but I'm also involved with several other projects linked with this topic. And just to present to you briefly, one of the studies is again based in Northern England, but it is using mixed methods and really quite a novel co-production approach to explore food security in adults living with severe mental illness. And this has identified quite shocking levels of food insecurity. 40 to 50% of adults with severe mental illness don't have enough money to buy an adequate diet, which therefore, of course, translates into a poorer quality diet, which we know predisposes them to overweight and obesity. And then another project I'm involved with is the Diamond Study, which is a national programme, which is aiming to support people living with severe mental illness and self-management approaches for addressing their approach to managing their own diabetes. So finally, in terms of future research plans through which I hope to use the award from EASO-Novo Nordisk Foundation, obviously this is an ambitious programme of work and won't be able to achieve this all in the first year. However, the work's largely broken down into two main work packages. The first is based in secure mental health settings, building on the work that I've described to you already, where we know that the issues around excess weight are most extreme. And here I plan to co-produce and then feasibility test an intervention on the basis of the existing empirical evidence, and then hopefully to roll this out nationally across several NHS trusts, and then to undertake a realist evaluation of what works for whom and under what circumstances. And then the second work package will build on this work by expanding out into community settings where the vast majority of people with severe mental illness live. And here for the first time, we'll aim to accurately measure the prevalence of overweight and obesity in this context, to explore more about the interactions between physical and mental health that I alluded to earlier, and then finally to build on this in terms of co-identification of priority action areas and approaches for addressing overweight and obesity amongst people living with severe mental illness in community settings. So these are some of the funders who've supported me in my work so far. I'm so grateful, as I've said, for the opportunity to continue this work further through the funding we've described. Very happy to answer any questions now and also to answer questions going forward if you want to contact me on the address given.
Thank you, Susanna. We'll have a few minutes for questions. Britt, the floor is yours.
Yes, I cannot see any questions in the chat yet. Is anyone having any questions? No, you can just raise your hand, or of course also welcome to type it in the chat. In the meanwhile, I would like to ask you a question, Susanna. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. So based on the knowledge that you gained from your interviews, so what kind of interventions do you think is required to try to change or improve the situation around obesity in these secure care settings?
Thank you. Yes, that's the million-dollar question, really. What's going to work in these settings? I think probably the key take home is that it needs to be something that is diverse and covers many of the issues that I've described, because probably tackling one aspect in isolation is not really going to solve the problem. It needs to be really a whole system or a whole setting approach. And included in that, I think it's really key to have service user or patient involvement, because ultimately, unless people are engaged in the process, they won't be able to make long-standing future changes to their management of overweight and obesity, particularly if they're then taking that out to community settings when they're discharged in future. It's a lifelong challenge, so something that they need to be able to be very much involved with. I think it's also important to involve the whole multidisciplinary team. So whether that be medical, nursing staff, also dietitians, sports and exercise support staff, because that helps create a much more healthful environment, which moves away from this obesogenic environment, which I was describing to you. I think a good starting point for this would be having clearer multidisciplinary plans tailored to each individual. So when they come into the services, understanding that they're probably going to put on weight because of the medication, and their setting is probably not going to help with that. What are the key things for them? What are the priorities, the things that they want to do differently that they think are amenable to change? Putting that on paper and then reviewing that on a regular basis to see, actually, are they engaging with the dietitian, or do things need to change there? Would they like to be taking a different kind of type of exercise? What opportunities would they like to have? What are the key drivers? Because we do find that with almost all patients in the service, they've got some key motivators or key demands or things that they want to achieve. And if we can integrate that together with the management of their overweight and obesity, we're much more likely to succeed. So I don't have a precise answer to your question, but I hope that's an idea of some of the concepts that we might want to include going forwards.
Yeah, thank you a lot. So Walton have a question, I can see.
Yes. Thank you very much for the presentation. My question is, in public health, you map the problems, and then you generate solutions. But the most important of all is the implementation of these solutions. In this case, in those who are living in secure settings, what could be the ideal approach, measures taken, action plans in order to prevent obesity?
Yes, I think a point well made. It's all well and good having plans or observing issues, but if we don't have a good implementation approach, ultimately we won't be able to change the problem. You might be familiar with the implementation science field, and particularly there's something called normalization process theory, which tries really to capture what the challenges are, what the particular setting demands, and how one might embed that going forward. So I think I'm going to have that at the front and center of my mind when we're thinking about interventions and what we might do differently in future, that actually it needs to be theoretically based, understanding all the different aspects of the stakeholders involved in the setting, and that needs to be it needs to be reviewed regularly as well to make sure that what we're implementing is actually working, and we're not just based on an idealistic model, but this is actually is effective and works for those involved. I think it probably also comes back to patient and public involvement and making sure that is meaningful, and understanding that both for patients and staff and other people such as carers, that they see that it's a positive strategy which is working for them. So I think my answer, it needs to be both theoretical and practically based, and there's some excellent theoretical hooks on which to hang that, but PPI is also a key practical lever for moving that forward.
Thank you so much, Susanna. We'll move on to the next speaker.
Thank you.
So the next speaker is the recipient of the New Investigator Award in Childhood Obesity, Dr. Cristina Cadenas Sanchez. She's a Marie Curie postdoctoral fellow at the University of Granada in Spain, Stanford University, and VA Palo Alto Healthcare System. She's receiving the award for important research on such topics as the associations between physical activity and brain health among children with obesity, and the association between physical activity, fitness, and fat deposition among children with obesity. The floor is yours, Christine.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Yep, so you should see my screen now. Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation, for the invitation as well. I joined all the such a nice words that my colleagues has told before. And now we are moving to the childhood obesity, more like a very little kids, and now how is the reality, not only in Spain, but also like worldwide. So the title of my talk will be like building healthy minds and bodies. That's my aim, that's the aim of the grant, and that's the aim of the world. So briefly, just a very brief introduction of myself. I did my bachelor in sports science at the University of Granada in Spain. And right now, as Brian has told, I'm Marie Curie postdoctoral researcher at the University of Granada, but also at Stanford University. I did my PhD in 2018 approximately, and it was related with physical fitness, academic achievement, and brain in children with obesity. And if we need to summarize more or less my background in the sense of scientific articles, these words will be the words that describe my job, like children, adolescent, obesity, physical activity, exercise, and physical fitness will be my main topic. So to keep going to the introduction and my research lines, we are gonna move toward like a kind of trip from 2014 till now. And I would like to present some of the main data related to childhood obesity in the project that I have the pleasure to be working on. I started in 2014 as a pre-doctoral researcher in this project. It's called PREFIT, and PREFIT means basically physical fitness in preschool children from 3 to 5 years old. We got a question from someone outside of Spain, and they were asking us like, okay, guys, you are from sports science, you know how to assess physical fitness, but what should I do with preschool children from 3 to 5 years old when they are very little, like 3 years or even 2.9, 2.6 years old in the school? So we got that question, and we did a systematic review to try to get a battery of tests to assess physical fitness, because physical fitness is highly related with health. So we did many methodological studies in order to get more or less the PREFIT fitness battery. And then we assessed more than 3,000 children across Spain. As you can see in the map, it's not geographically like very well located, but it was contacting to friends, researchers that could implement or assess physical fitness in preschool children for free, because this project has no funding at all. So the main topic or the main paper related to this grant, to this award, is this one that is checking once more how is the prevalence of severe and morbid obesity and other weight status in 3 to 5 years old preschoolers. So the graphs that are presenting here have different data, but we can see perfectly that is still or in 3 to 5 years old already presents 21 to 34% of overweight and obesity. So that's a huge deal, and it's even more when you just look on the severe and morbid obesity, where we found that 2.5%, which will be translated to a Spanish population in 30,000 preschool children, had already severe or morbid obesity. This is one of the points that we need to address in general. It's not only Spain, but I'm pretty sure that this data will be probably very replicated in many other countries. So having this information of preschool children, we move forward in that trip that I invited you guys during these 10 minutes to move to the Active Brains project. Active Brains is a randomized control trial that we developed in Granada with 100 children with overweight and obesity from 8 to 12 years old. We move forward in the age, and we classify or randomly located in control group and exercise group. So the control group kept their activity, their usual routine, as they did before enrolling to the project, and the exercise group make the difference coming to the intervention at least 3 times per week, but we offer the exercise training during 5 days per week. The exercise was basically aerobic training plus strength training with a total duration of 90 minutes. And it was 20 weeks, that means 4.5 months of the duration. And the exercise was basically based on high intensity and games for enjoying and having fun, because a priori these kids don't want to do any exercise. So we try to make it as fun as possible. So the main aim of the project was how exercise can improve the brain health of these kids. So we did magnetic resonance imagings to check how is the gray matter and the white matter structure and function of these kids pre and post exercise program. And also we measure intelligence, cognitive performance, academic achievement, and psychological health, depression, stress, anxiety, happiness, self-esteem, all these concepts of psychological health by questionnaires. So the main paper is recently launched in JAMA Network Open in August of last year, and the one based on the secondary outcome is recently accepted in this journal, and it probably will be out of for reading at the end of this week or beginning of the next week. But based on this that is already published, we will focus on how exercise can improve or can modify, if so, brain health outcomes in children with overweight or obesity. So the results can be summarized in this figure, but I will translate you in case you don't get the point exactly of this kind of complex figure. If you see the dot going to the right side, is that the exercise improve intelligence, executive function, or academic achievement in children who attended to the exercise program comparing to the control group, those who didn't attend to the exercise. So we observed that intelligence and cognitive flexibility, but also academic achievement and not brain structure was related with brain health improvement after 4.5 months of exercise program. So basically, I'm sorry for that quick and brief touch of different articles, but basically from brain structure, we move kind of a similar sample to the fat depots, different fat depots and hepatic fat. So we moved to a figure project, which is probably, we can say, the sister of Active Brains project that was running in the north of Spain. Granada is in the south, and we have a colleague on the north of Spain, and we contact to run similar projects, but with different main outcomes. So they ran the project with more than 100 children with overweight obesity, same age, same inclusion criteria, and they also allocated to control and exercise group. However, the difference is a huge difference in the sense of the control group activity. They did a family-based lifestyle and psychoeducational program 2 times per month, which basically consists on different sessions of 90 minutes for parents and also for kids, but they were separated in the rooms. So they were having some seminars about dietary habits, physical activity, sleep, and also communication skills, feelings, and emotions. So this was a program that both groups, both control and exercise group, ran at the same time. So the difference is that the exercise group additionally has the exercise training, which is exactly the same games, the same intensities, and the same ideas, but a bit longer than the Active Brains project, which was basically based on brain structure. But here, the main outcome was hepatic fat. So both papers, like the main paper and this second paper, was published in Diabetes Care, and we observed that after the exercise plus as family-based psychoeducational program, they improve. That means they reduce the hepatic fat after these 5 months of intervention. And we also observe a couple of years later that this reduction observes in hepatic fat, which was measured also by magnetic resonance, as you can see in the figure, was also related with or was mediated by the muscular fat that we have in the muscle. So the reduction of EMAT, that we usually call EMAT, the intermuscular abdominal adipose tissue, plays a relevant role in the improvement, which means the reduction of the hepatic steatosis after this multi-component intervention that I have explained before. And lastly, this also really last paper, I don't remember, but probably was like kind of Christmas time last year when it came up. So we observed how the exercise plus family-based lifestyle intervention effect on abdominal fat deposits in the same children. And the main idea was, or the main outcome was the visceral adipose tissue, but also we look at the intermuscular adipose tissue and abdominal, subcutaneous, and the pancreas. The pancreas image you can see in the figure at the bottom is not the best quality figure, but it's the highest that we have got from the device. So as I said before, the visceral adipose tissue was the main, the primary outcome. So we observed that both groups, which is a good news as well, having a lifestyle intervention program also reduced the visceral adipose tissue, but also the reduction was 10% higher or greater in the exercise group, which combined also the lifestyle intervention. And these figures represented in another way, but it's a kind of similar figure, can also show us that the abdominal subcutaneous was also higher in the exercise group compared to the control group, and also the intermuscular and pancreatic fat. So the conclusion was that the addition of exercise to a lifestyle intervention program with the family members substantially enhanced the positive effect of on abdominal fat deposits in children with overweight and obesity. And although I haven't presented here, we have seen that the reduction of the visceral adipose tissue also mediate the improvement of insulin sensitivity, which is also very important in this sample. So to finish with just giving you some take-home message, severe remembering on 3 to 5 years old, we have seen that severe and morbid obesity is already present in this group of age. Exercise can positively affect intelligence and cognitive flexibility, also academic achievement, but we haven't found any change in brain structure and function. And about hepatic fat and other fat depots, so we have seen the addition of exercise to a lifestyle intervention program substantially reduces hepatic fat and other fat depots in children with overweight and obesity. And as I said before, the fat that we have in the muscles play a relevant role in improvement of hepatic fat after this intervention. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much for the European Association for the Study of Obesity and Novo Nordisk Foundation for giving us the opportunity to be in this webinar, to be in Dublin, and to be in Venice next year.
Thank you so much, Christina. We have time for one quick question.
Oh, so do we have any questions? Please raise your hand if you have a question.
There is one,
One in the chat.
There is one in the chat, if you want to go with that one.
Ah, sorry. It's Volkan saying, I would like to know about the weight change data in your study.
Yeah, this is the paper that is coming out probably at the end of this week or next week. We focus on cardiometabolic risk and psychological health in the sense of depression, anxiety, and mental health. I can say now that we observe reductions in fat mass index and body mass index, but we did not find anything related to mental health, like kind of depression, anxiety, stress, self-esteem. We have discussed in the paper why we think that we haven't found anything related to mental health, because our feeling was completely the opposite, but that was our feeling after the intervention. And yes, we improved physical fitness. That was also one of the outcomes in that paper. But it will be coming probably for next week in the same journal, JAMA Network Open, and I will be the first author of this paper. So you will get all the image and figures and information about this weight change. We also measure, we haven't analyzed that, but we also measure what happened with these kids after 8 months without having exercise. So we measure pre, post, and follow up 8 months later, but we haven't analyzed this third kind of picture.
All right, excellent. We'll be looking forward to those results, Christina.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the presentation. This was lovely.
Thank you so much, Fran.
All right, so next we'll have the recipient of the new Investigator Award in Basic Science, Dr. Cynthia Folguera Cobos. She's a postdoctoral fellow at the Spanish National Center for Cardiovascular Research in Madrid. She has conducted research showing that a specific mitochondrial protein is downregulated in adipose tissue among people with obesity compared to those with normal weight. This protein may play a role in thermogenesis in brown adipose tissue, opening a therapeutic window for obesity prevention by modulating its expression. The floor is yours, Cynthia.
Thank you, Ram. Okay. Do you see the presentation?
Okay, so good morning and thank you for the presentation, and also the European Association from the Study of Obesity and these early career members for attending this networking activity. And I decided to apply to this new Investigator Award in Basic Science because it will offer me the opportunity to learning and training in the topic of my research career. That is one of the biggest problems that you know, that is the obesity. And in obesity, there are many metabolic pathways that are altered in this disease. And I think that to better understand this disease, it's necessary to investigate the molecular mechanisms that control and regulate the energy balance, because obesity is an excessive accumulation of fat that occurs as a consequence of a chronic positive imbalance on this energy balance. And in obesity and also in metabolism are very important the interorgan communication to integrate and coordinate the full body metabolism. And the brain, and especially the hypothalamus, has been considered a site for whole body homeostatic regulation, controlling the body weight and the energy metabolism. And also the gastrointestinal tract that acts as an endocrine organ, secreting different hormones that control and playing an important role in this regulation of the energy homeostasis. And this is in this moment trying to study this gut and brain axis when I started my scientific career, developing my doctoral thesis in Santiago de Compostela in the north of Spain between three groups, the groups under the supervision of Rubén Nogueiras, Luisa María Seoane, and Felipe Casanueva. And we focus in this new hormone, this gastrointestinal hormone that's called uroguanilin. And we found that when we treat the mice, the central treatment of these mice with uroguanilin reduced weight gain and also adiposity in mice that fed a high-fat diet. Mainly, we found that the brain, when we inject uroguanilin in the brain, this induced brown adipose tissue thermogenesis and also browning in the white adipose tissue and lipid mobilization through the stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system. So in this study, we demonstrate that this central uroguanilin regulates the energy balance, controlling this peripheral metabolism in these mice with obesity. We also demonstrate that activating the same receptor, but in this way, an oral treatment with this linaclotide that are an agonist of the same of uroguanilin, activating the same receptor in the brain, our mice exhibit a significant reduction on the body weight without modifying the food intake. So we want to deep in the mechanism by which linaclotide exert its actions, and we found that in the mediovasal hypothalamic area, the activation of this receptor GUCY2C are able to increase the activation of the sympathetic nervous system, increasing the thermogenesis in the brown adipose tissue, increasing and stimulating the energy expenditure, and exert a beneficial effect in our mice, decreasing the body weight. But during my PhD, I developed other projects, but with the same aim. We want to study novel hypothalamic signals that are involved in the regulation of energy homeostasis through the central nervous system and its implication in metabolic disorders. And we demonstrate that the activation of the dopamine receptor system, the dopamine receptor 2, in these hypothalamic neurons, specifically in the lateral hypothalamic area and the zona incerta, are able to activate the orexin neurons and finally stimulate the sympathetic nervous system and trigger the brown adipose tissue thermogenesis, with a consequence decrease in their body weight. Also, we observed if the activation of this dopamine system in humans are the same that we found in mice, and in collaboration with clinical researchers such as Gemma Frubeck and Javier Salvador, we observed that the treatment with cabergoline, that is a dopamine receptor agonist, improves the glycemic profile, increasing the energy expenditure and also a decrease in the body weight. We have also demonstrated that this dopamine signaling in the brain are mediated the protection in rat pups that delay weaning after feeding in a high-fat diet in the adulthood. So we show that this is possible because activating this dopamine receptor in the brain in these rats that are stay with the mothers 1 week more, this delay weaning protects these rats in adulthood when they fed a high-fat diet. And this is because we activate the brown adipose tissue thermogenesis and also increase the energy expenditure. This prolonged breastfeeding constitutes a protective mechanism against obesity involving the action of this dopamine receptor in the brain, but also hepatic FGF21 by affecting these long-lasting physiological changes in the hypothalamic regulation of the control of body weight. So to this point, in all my research, we have been able to lose the body weight mediated by the signals in the brain, activating the thermogenesis in the brown fat and also the browning in the white fat. But also for many years, we think in adipose tissue, and we found in an organ that are able to storage the energy, but are not able to activate this energy. But now we know that the brown adipose tissue is able to increase the thermogenesis, and also we have dissipate this energy, and it's able to control the body weight. And additionally, the white adipose tissue has the plasticity to acquire these brown adipose tissue properties, becoming these beige adipocytes through this process that's called browning, and that protects against obesity. So we want to activate this part of the balance, increasing the thermogenesis. And also, we want to study mechanisms by which activating this brown adipose tissue, we are able to increase the energy expenditure and decrease the body weight. And the precise and identification of novel molecular mechanisms that control this functionality of the adipose tissue, and also the secretion of different hormones that could control these pathways, are important in the development of new drugs to combat the metabolic disorders and also the obesity and other comorbidities. So in this thermogenesis pathway, the key organelle that are involved in this in the metabolism of the adipocyte is the mitochondrion. The mitochondria play a key role in this adipose tissue function, even including the secretory capacity of the brown and the white adipose tissue, and has the it's described that obesity and metabolic disorders have been linked to mitochondrial dysfunction in this adipose tissue, and it's known that incorrect mitochondrial adaptation may trigger type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, and also aging. So we know that in the mitochondrial occurs an unusual mechanism for uncoupling respiration from the ATP synthesis, and the protein responsible for this phenomenon is the uncoupling protein 1, UCP1. But UCP1 has been regarded as the main regulator of this brown adipose tissue mitochondrial thermogenic capacity. However, recent studies suggest us that maybe there are another processes of activating the thermogenesis independently of this UCP1 protein. And if we found, in collaboration with Professor Miguel Marcos in the hospital of the University Hospital of Salamanca, we found that a specific mitochondrial protein that is located in the inner membrane decrease in the expression of this, we found a decrease in the expression of this protein in adipose tissue of patients with obesity that inversely correlates with a decrease in the body fat and also in the in the BMI. So we decided to study this protein further, and together with my PhD student, Beatriz, we found that the deletion of this protein in mice, in obese mice, are able to decrease their body weight gain together with an increase in the energy expenditure and an increase in the thermogenesis, as you can see here in the brown adipose tissue, increasing the brown adipose tissue temperature in these photos. So it seems that this study more deeper this protein would open us a new window for the obesity protection by modulation its expression of this mitochondrial protein. Also, we have this preliminary data that indicates that when we put these mice without this specific mitochondrial protein after cold exposure, these mice are able to maintain better their temperature, increasing this brown adipose tissue temperature, suggesting that this protein may control the thermogenesis in brown adipose tissue. So we have this preliminary data that indicates that these mitochondrial proteins is maybe a good target to study. And however, we want to study how these mitochondrial function are affected the adipose tissue more deeply. And in this project, we will use our mice without this protein in different conditions, feeding a high-fat diet after cold exposure and thermoneutrality conditions. And we want to evaluate different metabolic parameters in metabolic cages, temperature, and also body composition with MRA. But also we want to know more about the biochemical changes that are altered in this mitochondria using Ouroboros, that is a fluorespirometer, and the seahorse analysis, and evaluate the alteration of the alteration in the different mitochondrial complexes. And also we want to modulate and inhibit specifically in the brown adipose tissue this protein using nanoparticles, and identify maybe that there are novel adipokines that are released from this model. And also we want to increase the number of samples analyzed in our preliminary data in the human study. We have different cohorts with patients with obesity and control patients. We have the samples of blood and also the adipose tissue, and we want to perform different metabolomic and proteomic analysis. So finally, I want to thanks to all the people of my group and our collaborators, because without them and their all these projects would not be possible. And thanks the funding, especially the European Association from the Study of Obesity and Novo Nordisk Foundation to support this project, and for continuing to bet on research from basic science. And thanks you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. We have a couple of minutes for questions, so please, if anyone has a question, go ahead.
Yes, please ask your questions in the chat if you have any, or raise your hand. In the meanwhile, I was thinking, Cynthia, I don't know anything about mice actually, but I recently learned that mice has a lot more brown fat than humans has.
Yeah, it is.
So how big an effect do you think activating this brown fat tissue would have, like in humans compared to mice?
Well, this is a difficult question, because when we observe these changes in mice, sometimes it's difficult to apply in the humans. But for example, in the previous study that I present, maybe we can inject these nanoparticles. Maybe we want to check the levels of this protein in the blood of patients, because we check only in the adipose tissue. And we want to know maybe in different, we're planning to do different studies after surgeries, bariatric surgeries, and control the levels of these specific proteins in different human samples.
I'll ask a question as well.
Yes, go ahead.
Nice. Yeah, very good talk. Thank you. And I mean, very good point, Britt, because the fact that the brownization of white adipose tissue was never been reproduced in humans so far. It's something that we have to deal with and think about it. But I'm curious about like the first therapeutic approach that you proposed, the one targeting like the brain.
Mhm.
So in a scenario in which there are more and more obesity drugs, and some of them are going to be oral soon, how do you envision your therapeutic approach that, if I understand correctly, it's going to be intrathecal or in the CNS in a how do you think it's gonna be take from patients?
Yeah, for patients, it's difficult. And for example, it's my background. I moved to the neuroscience and now I'm focusing on study this peripheral mechanism. And we don't know, for example, how affect this protein to the brain of these mice. We're planning to check now, and we don't know if these actions of this browning or this thermogenesis activation of the brown adipose tissue are through the sympathetic nervous system. So maybe in the next ECHO Congress, I will ask you better this part.
I hope to. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Cynthia. We'll move on to the last speaker today. So the last speaker is Dr. Sini Heinonen, and she received the new Investigator Award in Clinical Research. She's a postdoctoral fellow at the Helsinki University Hospital in Finland, and she's being recognized for her pioneering research on the association between obesity and a significant reduction in the mitochondrial capacity of adipose tissue, which profoundly impacts metabolic health. Her current work investigates how weight loss through bariatric surgery can restore adipose tissue metabolism, a key discovery which can support developing new treatments for people with obesity. Thank you for joining us, Sini. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much. So I will start sharing my screen. Okay, I hope that you will see my screen now. Yes, great. So thank you really much for the opportunity to speak to you today. And also I'm very extremely grateful and honored to be receiving this prize from EASO and then from the Novo Nordisk Foundation. So I'm talking to you today on mitochondrial metabolism in adipose tissue in obesity and in weight loss. So I'm a medical doctor and postdoctoral fellow at the Obesity Research Unit in Helsinki University Hospital. So we are led by Professor Kirsi Pietiläinen, and we study the effects of obesity and of weight loss on adipose tissue and muscle and mitochondrial metabolism. We also have many international collaboration whom we highly value in their expertise. So in obesity, adipose tissue is dysfunctional. Excess energy and fats accumulate into adipose tissue, and they cause downregulation of mitochondrial biogenesis. They cause insulin resistance, inflammation, and when adipose tissue capacity is exceeded, lipids overflow to other tissues, causing insulin resistance, inflammation, from the liver excess production of glucose and fats to circulation, muscle insulin resistance, and also beta cell dysfunction in pancreas. So we have previously shown that in obesity, there is a down regulation of mitochondrial biogenesis, both in adipose tissue, but also in purified adipocytes. So we studied identical twins, of which the other one had obesity and the other one was lean. And we could show that indeed in the twins who had obesity, so their gene expression pathways related to mitochondria were downregulated. Also, the upstream regulator genes of these pathways were down. We then measured mitochondrial DNA copy number, which represent the mitochondrial amount in the cells, and noticed that this was down. in the twins who had obesity. Also, the transcripts that the mitochondrial genome produces were downregulation, as well as the mitochondrial ribosomal protein transcripts, and finally the protein subunit levels of the oxidative phosphorylation system, where the oxidative energy is produced. So this meant that in obesity, there is a widespread downregulation of mitochondrial biogenesis. So we then wanted to find out what happens after dieting. Could dieting improve this situation? And in Riikka Jokinen's work, we had 19 participants who underwent an 8 weeks very low caloric diet, and then they were followed up till 1 year. And here we surprisingly could see that with the weight loss by dieting, the mitochondrial pathways of tricarboxylic acid cycle, oxidative phosphorylation, fatty acid oxidation, and branched chain amino acid metabolism were even further downregulated after dieting. And this was not a promising result for weight loss on the mitochondrial side. So in our next study, Birgitta van der Kolk and Maheswari Mani and our postdocs showed by comparing 3 dieting studies with 3 bariatric surgical studies that after dieting at 1 year, it seemed that the mitochondrial related pathways were downregulated, but after surgical weight loss intervention, they were upregulated. And then this was an extremely interesting finding that kind of guided our next studies on this. So it seems that the effects of bariatric surgery are at least partly mediated to gut hormones. So gut hormones like GLP-1, PYY, GIP, secretin, amylin, and then bile acids are elevated after surgery, and they seem to boost mitochondrial function or metabolism, at least in brown adipocytes in humans and in mice. But it's not known what happens in white adipose tissue in humans. So the aim of my award research were to study, does bariatric surgery prevent the downregulation of this mitochondrial oxidative capacity that is seen in adipose tissue after obesity? And do bile acids or gut hormones mediate the beneficial metabolic effects of surgery to adipose tissue? And do bile acids or gut hormones improve mitochondrial capacity in cultured primary human adipose cells? So the study design was as followed. We enrolled 120 patients who underwent a surgical induced weight loss, and then 30 patients undergoing diet-induced weight loss. They both had a very low caloric diet, first of 4 to 6 weeks, and they were followed up till 6 months and 12 months after the intervention. And we measured various markers of body composition, clinical examinations, a laboratory panel with glucose and lipid markers. And we also took a mixed meal test to determine circulating bile acids and gut hormones postprandially, so after a meal. And then we took adipose tissue biopsies and cell lines to determine global transcriptomics and proteomics, like from adipose tissue. So we first noticed that these postprandial plasma bile acids increase after surgery. And this was true for total bile acids as very many of the subclasses. And this was partly already before known, but also a very interesting finding to see after the surgical induced weight loss. We then measured adipose tissue parameters, and we could evidence an upregulation of mitochondrial parameters after surgery. So mitochondrial DNA copy number, representing the mitochondrial amount, was upregulated after surgical induced weight loss, and also many transcripts in adipose tissue that were related to mitochondria, and among others, the main mitochondrial regulator PGC1 alpha were up after surgical induced weight loss. We then went on to cell cultures with human primary preadipocytes to see whether these gut hormones or bile acid would have any effect on mitochondria in the cell culture side. And we could actually see that when we treated the cells with bile acids, and here I will show the data of bile acid DCA. So we could evidence an upregulation of mitochondrial DNA amount. We also saw an upregulation of cellular respiration measured by Seeholt's extracellular flux analyzer, and transcripts that were related to mitochondria. Then we also measured the same parameters after treatment with the cells of gut hormone secretin. And here too, we could see increase in mitochondrial DNA amount, increase in cellular respiration, and transcript related to mitochondria or beneficial other metabolic effects in the cells. And this data together kind of, it is very promising in a way that in human cells, this kind of compounds could act as mitochondrial activators and give a hope for potential future medications too. So as conclusions, I could say that in obesity, we evidence a widespread downregulation of mitochondrial parameters, mitochondrial DNA, gene expression, protein levels. But after diet-induced weight loss, there seems to be even more downregulation of mitochondrial DNA and gene expression. However, this does not happen with bariatric surgery, but there is an increase in mitochondrial DNA gene expression and possibly also proteins or cellular respiration. And this is an interesting field for future studies for cyclic hormones secreted after a meal from the gut, like bile acids and gut hormones. So I am happy with any questions you would like to have on the subject, and still very grateful and honored to be receiving this prize and then funding for this project so that we can go on with cell culture studies on this and then following gut hormones. But thank you very much, and please any questions that you would have on the subject.
Thank you, Stini. We have some time for questions, yes.
Yes, thank you for a very interesting presentation, Stini. I cannot see any questions in the chat. Please raise your hands if you have any questions. Okay, otherwise I have a question for you. I was thinking about in the twin study and where you see these differences in the mitochondrial function. So do you know if these changes are due to obesity, or are they also causing obesity to develop? Do you have any idea for that?
That's an interesting question. Like, we study the twins at the one time point.
Mm.
So what we can see is the effect of acquired obesity, the effect of that the other one has developed obesity and the other one not at that time point. That is independent of the genetic effects because they share the same background. But I think it is like that we believe that when you develop obesity, you kind of cause this downregulation of mitochondrial capacity in your adipose tissue, and then this further is a problem if you want to diet or lose weight, and then that kind of causes the downregulation of the metabolism, and it probably also then keeps the weight up. So it's probably this kind of vicious circle then that develops. What the twins personally report, so why, for example, they acquired this illness, is that the other one, for example, started exercising less or eating more unhealthy after their teenager years. So, but it's an interesting question, but this is what we believe it shows.
Thank you. I can see Lisa have a question.
Hi, Senate. Thanks very much. Sorry, thanks very much for your presentation. It was so interesting. I was just wondering what your kind of next steps for your studies are going to be. Do you have any sort of immediate plans as to what you're going to do with the award fund?
We are going to continue with the cell culture studies. So we have some cell lines, so we are going to replicate the findings in more human cell lines, and then with also other gut hormones in this aspect. And then we have a full set of like transcriptomics, proteomics, metabolomics coming from the same twins that can be added, and probably will reveal a lot more where to target after this kind of bariatric surgery induced weight loss compared to dieting. So which are the targets you could really kind of find from this data to find like the mediators, that why is surgery so effective, and then it's still not possible to all people suffering from obesity. So we need to find like the mechanisms and mediators of surgical induced weight loss, and then try to examine them to finding new treatments.
Thanks. I look forward to hearing more about it.
Nice, thanks.
Do we have any more questions? Sini? Doesn't look like that.
All right, then I would like to thank you, Sini. Thank you so much. And many thanks to all of the excellent speakers we had today. Your presentations were very interesting, and I would like to thank the audience for joining us today to listen and interact. So the next award applications, so for 2024, the EASO-Novo Nordisk Fund applications will open at the end of September already, 2023. So keep an eye out for those. If you feel like after today you feel inspired, you feel like you deserve some recognition as well, keep an eye out for September 2023. The applications will open then. So with that, I will close our session for today. So our e-learning hub is supported by an unrestricted educational grant from the Boehringer Ingelheim. Also, please remember to complete our evaluation survey. Lisa will share it in the chat. Because with your feedback, we can improve our webinars further. And we'll be back in September. We'll have Paul Christiansen from the UK on success with obesity statistics. And with that, I would like to thank you all again for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this session and have a nice summer. And we look forward to seeing you again in September. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks very much.
Bye. Bye.